The cold concrete pressed against my back as I watched my breath turn into small clouds in the freezing air. 3 weeks ago, I lived in a warm house with my family. Tonight, I'm hiding under a highway bridge in Denver, clutching a wet suitcase like it's my only friend. The worst part? My own son put me here. But what happened next changed everything, and by the end of the story, he would learn that throwing away your mother was the biggest mistake of his life. Before I tell you this unbelievable story, drop a comment below and let me know what country you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers all around the world. 3 weeks earlier, I was still living with my son David and his wife Jessica in their house in Phoenix. At 74 years old, I thought I had found my final home. David had invited me to stay after my apartment lease ended. "Mom, you belong with family," he told me. Those words felt like a warm hug back then. Now they feel like lies. The trouble started slowly. Little comments from Jessica about how I left dishes in the sink too long. Eye rolls when I asked questions during their TV shows. Whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. But I ignored it all because David was my baby, my only child, and I believed blood was stronger than any disagreement. The breaking point came on a stormy Tuesday night. I was in my bedroom reading when I heard loud voices from the kitchen. Jessica was angry about something, and David's voice got louder and louder. Then I heard my name. "She has to go, David. I can't do this anymore." "She's my mother, Jess." "Where is she supposed to go?" "I don't care. Figure it out." My heart sank into my stomach. I sat frozen on my bed, holding my book with shaking hands. These people who I cooked for, cleaned for, and loved like my own daughter were planning to throw me away like garbage. The next morning, David knocked on my door. His face looked tired and sad, but his words were cold as ice. "Mom, we need to talk." He sat on the edge of my bed and wouldn't look me in the eyes. "Jessica and I have been talking. We think it might be better if you found your own place. You know, more independence for you." Independence. That's what he called abandoning his 74-year-old mother. "David, I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?"
"No, Mom."
"It's just complicated. We need our space." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Okay." For the next week, I searched for apartments I could afford on my small Social Security check. Everything was too expensive or in dangerous neighborhoods. David pretended to help, but he was always too busy or had some excuse. Then came that terrible night. The rain pounded on the windows like angry fists. I was in the kitchen making tea when Jessica stormed in, her face red with rage. "I can't take this anymore," she screamed. "You're always here, always in the way, always asking questions." David appeared behind her, and I thought he would defend me. Instead, he just stood there like a coward. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe it's time." "Time for what?" "Time for you to go." My world shattered into a million pieces. "Go where, David?" "It's almost midnight, and it's pouring rain." "I don't know, but you can't stay here tonight." Jessica crossed her arms and smirked. "Pack your stuff. Now." With tears streaming down my face, I stuffed my clothes into my old suitcase. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip it closed. David stood in the doorway watching me pack my entire life into one bag, and he said nothing. When I dragged my suitcase to the front door, the rain was coming down like bullets. I turned back one last time, hoping David would change his mind. "Please," I whispered. "I'm your mother." He looked at the floor. "You'll figure it out, Mom. You always do." Then he picked up my suitcase and threw it onto the front porch. The old fabric split open, and my clothes scattered across the wet concrete. "You're nothing but a burden," he shouted. "We're done taking care of you. If you can watch a mother thrown into the rain by her only son and still scroll past without subscribing, I don't even know what that says about you. Prove you still have a heart. Hit that button right now. If not, explain yourself in the comments." The front door slammed shut with a sound that still echoes in my nightmares. I stood in the rain, looking at my life spread across the ground like trash. My favorite sweater was already soaked. The photo of David's father was lying in a puddle. I gathered what I could and stuffed it back into the broken suitcase. Then I walked away from the only family I had left. I wandered through the streets of Phoenix for hours. My shoes were soaked, my clothes were dripping, and my heart was completely broken. Every house I passed was warm and dry, full of families who loved each other. I felt like a ghost haunting a world I no longer belonged to. Eventually, I found myself at a bus station. With the little money I had, I bought a ticket to Denver. I don't know why I chose Denver. Maybe because it was far from the pain in Phoenix. The bus ride took forever. I sat in the back corner, trying not to cry in front of the other passengers. An old man with kind eyes offered me his jacket, but I was too proud to accept it. I should have taken that jacket. Denver was cold and unfamiliar. I spent my first night in the bus station, pretending to wait for another bus. Security guards kept asking if I needed help, but what could I tell them? That my son threw me away like garbage? By the second night, I had no choice. I found a spot under the Interstate 25 bridge where other homeless people gathered. The concrete was freezing, but it was dry. I used my broken suitcase as a pillow and covered myself with every piece of clothing I owned. The other homeless people were kind to me. Maria, a woman about my age, shared her blanket. Thomas, a veteran with sad eyes, gave me half of a sandwich. These strangers showed me more kindness than my own son. But the cold was brutal. My joints ached constantly. My clothes never dried completely. I caught a nasty cough that wouldn't go away. Some nights, I wondered if I would freeze to death before morning. I slept under that bridge, forgotten and abandoned. If you wouldn't want the same fate for your own mother, then subscribe before you even breathe another second. If you refuse, at least confess in the comments why you think mothers deserve to be left to die. The worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the loneliness. I had raised David by myself after his father died. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his clothes, his food, his college. I cheered at every baseball game, helped with every school project, and loved him with every piece of my heart. And he repaid me by throwing me into the street like trash. 3 weeks into my life under the bridge, something miraculous happened. I was trying to sleep when I heard footsteps approaching. Most people avoided our little camp, so I was immediately alert. "Excuse me," said a woman's voice. "I'm looking for Helen Martinez." I sat up, confused. Nobody knew I was here. "That's me." The woman stepped into the light from a nearby street lamp, and I gasped. It was my younger sister, Victoria. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. Victoria was 72 years old, but she looked amazing. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore an expensive-looking coat. Most importantly, her eyes were filled with love and concern. "Oh, Helen," she whispered, kneeling beside me. "What happened to you?" I started crying. Not the quiet tears I had been shedding for weeks, but deep, body-shaking sobs. Victoria wrapped her arms around me and held me tight. "It's okay, sister. I'm here now. I'm here." Imagine being 74, homeless, coughing in the cold, and the only family you raised doesn't care. If you can picture that and still not subscribe, then type out your excuse below, because the rest of us will never understand you. Through my tears, I managed to tell her everything. How David and Jessica had thrown me out. How I ended up on the streets. How I had nowhere else to go. Victoria listened without interrupting. When I finished, her face was hard as stone. "That ungrateful little boy," she said. "After everything you did for him." "Victoria, how did you find me?" She smiled sadly. "I hired a private investigator. When you stopped answering your phone and David told me you had moved away, I knew something was wrong. It took 3 weeks to track you down." I couldn't believe it. While David was probably enjoying his peaceful house, my sister was searching the entire country for me. "Come on," Victoria said, helping me to my feet. We're going home. Home where? My home. Our home. You're never sleeping on the street again. Victoria drove a beautiful black BMW that smelled like leather and expensive perfume. As we drove through the city, she explained that she had become very successful in real estate investing. She owned properties across the country and had more money than she knew what to do with. I always meant to reach out more, she said. But after Mom died, we just drifted apart. I should have been there for you. You're here now, I told her. That's all that matters. We drove for hours, heading south toward New Mexico. Victoria had a house in Santa Fe, she explained, with plenty of room for both of us. But first, she said, we're stopping at a hotel. You need a hot shower, a good meal, and a real bed. The hotel was fancier than anywhere I had ever stayed. Victoria got us adjoining rooms and ordered room service. I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, washing away weeks of dirt, sweat, and despair. When I came out of the bathroom, Victoria had laid out new clothes on the bed. Soft jeans, a warm sweater, and comfortable shoes, all in my size. How did you know my size? I remember everything about you, Helen. Even after all these years. We ate dinner in my room, steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans. It was the first real meal I'd had in weeks. As I ate, Victoria told me about her life. She had never married, focusing instead on building her business empire. I was always jealous of you, she admitted. You had David, a family. I just had money. Money isn't everything, I said. No, but it sure helps when family lets you down. The next morning, we continued our drive to Santa Fe. Victoria's house was incredible, a sprawling adobe mansion with mountain views and a swimming pool. My room was bigger than David's entire living room. This is too much, I protested. Nonsense. This is what family does for each other. Real family. For the next few days, Victoria pampered me like a queen. She took me shopping for new clothes. We went to fancy restaurants and got our nails done. She even hired a doctor to check on my cough and make sure the cold hadn't caused any permanent damage. Slowly, I began to feel human again. The constant fear and sadness started to fade. I was safe, warm, and loved. But Victoria had bigger plans than just giving me a place to stay. One morning over breakfast, she handed me a folder full of documents. What's this? Your new life, she said with a smile. I opened the folder and nearly fainted. Inside were papers for a condominium in Albuquerque, deed made out to Helen Martinez. The photos showed a beautiful two-bedroom unit with a balcony and mountain views. Victoria, I can't accept this. You're not accepting it. You already own it. I bought it yesterday and transferred the deed to your name. I flipped through the papers, unable to believe what I was seeing. The condo was worth over $350,000. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the folder was a bank statement showing a new account in my name with a balance of $5 million. $5 million. I stared at the number until my eyes watered. This can't be real. It's real, Helen. You're a millionaire now. But why? This is too much. Victoria reached across the table and took my hands. When Mom died, she left us each a small inheritance. I invested mine and turned it into a fortune. You used yours to raise David and take care of your family. Now it's time for you to be taken care of. I was crying again, but this time they were tears of joy and disbelief. There's one more thing, Victoria said. She pulled out another document. This is a restraining order against David and Jessica. If they try to contact you or come near your new home, they'll be arrested. How did you get this? I told the judge about how they threw you out in the rain. He was not pleased. 2 days later, Victoria drove me to Albuquerque to see my new home. The condo was even more beautiful than the photos. It was on the 4th floor of a luxury building with a doorman, a gym, and a rooftop garden. My apartment had huge windows, modern appliances, and furniture that probably cost more than I used to make in a year. The master bedroom had a king-size bed with the softest sheets I had ever felt. But the best part was the balcony. I could see the Sandia Mountains in the distance, painted purple and gold by the setting sun. It was the most beautiful view I had ever seen. "Do you like it?" Victoria asked. "Like it? I love it. But I still can't believe it's really mine." "Believe it, sister. You've earned this." Victoria stayed with me for the first week, helping me settle in and learn about the building. She introduced me to my neighbors, mostly retired professionals who welcomed me warmly. The building manager, a friendly woman named Carmen, gave me all the important phone numbers and explained the building rules. The doorman, Miguel, promised to keep an eye out for any unwanted visitors. "Your sister told us about your situation," Carmen said gently. "Don't worry. We'll make sure you're safe here." My favorite neighbor was Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old retired teacher who lived across the hall. She invited me for tea on my second day, and we immediately bonded over our shared love of mystery novels. "You have good energy," she told me. "I can tell you're a survivor." For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But Victoria warned me that David and Jessica wouldn't give up easily. "Once they find out about your money, they'll come crawling back," she said. "They'll apologize and cry and promise to be better. Don't believe them." What if David really is sorry? Helen, a truly sorry person doesn't throw their mother into the rain. They'll only want you back because you're rich now. Part of me hoped she was wrong. Part of me still loved the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But I knew Victoria was right. David had shown his true colors, and money doesn't change a person's character. It just reveals it. Victoria returned to Santa Fe after making sure I was completely settled. Before she left, she gave me the business card of her lawyer, Margaret Stone. "Margaret knows your whole story," Victoria said. "If anyone tries to cause trouble, call her immediately." For the next month, I lived peacefully in my new home. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, and even learned to use the building's gym. My health improved dramatically with good food, warm shelter, and no stress. I made new friends and discovered hobbies I never had time for when I was working so hard. I learned to paint watercolors and joined a senior hiking group. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself instead of taking care of everyone else. The only shadow on my happiness was the silence from David. I had given him my new phone number through a mutual friend, hoping he would call to apologize or at least check if I was okay. But my phone never rang. That silence hurt more than all the mean words Jessica had ever said. Then, exactly 6 weeks after I moved into my new home, everything changed. I was watering my balcony plants when Miguel called from downstairs. "Mrs. Martinez, you have visitors. A man and woman who say they're your family." My heart skipped. What are their names? David and Jessica Martinez. So they had found me. Victoria was right. Once they learned about my money, they came running. "Should I send them up?" Miguel asked. I thought for a long moment. Part of me wanted to tell Miguel to send them away. But another part, the part that still remembered holding David as a baby, needed to hear what they had to say. Send them up. I quickly changed into one of my new outfits, a beautiful blue dress that Victoria had bought me. If David and Jessica wanted to see the new Helen Martinez, they were going to see all of her. The knock on my door was soft and hesitant. I looked through the peephole and saw David standing in the hallway, holding flowers. Jessica stood behind him, looking nervous and uncomfortable. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Hello, David." "Hi, Mom." His voice was small and ashamed. "You look different." I did look different. I had gained back the weight I lost on the streets. My hair was professionally colored and styled. My skin glowed with health and happiness. "I am different," I said calmly. "Can we come in? We need to talk to you." I stepped aside and let them enter. They walked into my living room and stopped, staring at the expensive furniture and beautiful artwork. "Wow," Jessica said. This place is incredible. Thank you. David was looking around like he couldn't believe his eyes. Mom, how can you afford all this? That's not your concern anymore. He flinched at my cold tone. Mom, we came here to apologize. We made a terrible mistake. What mistake was that, David? Throwing you out. Making you leave. We were wrong, and we're sorry. Jessica nodded eagerly. So sorry, Helen. I don't know what came over me. I was stressed about work and took it out on you. I looked at them both for a long moment. They seemed sincere, but Victoria's words echoed in my mind. They wouldn't be here if I was still homeless. Where did you think I went when you threw me out in the rain? David looked at the floor. I thought you'd figure something out. Maybe stay with a friend. What friends, David? I spent my entire life taking care of you. When did I have time to make friends? I don't know. I lived under a bridge for 3 weeks. I slept on concrete and ate out of garbage cans. I could have died out there. Jessica gasped. Oh my God, Helen. We had no idea. You didn't want to know. You just wanted me gone. David was crying now. Mom, we're here to make it right. We want you to come home. Home. I laughed bitterly. You mean back to your house where I'm a burden? Where Jessica rolls her eyes every time I speak. It won't be like that anymore, Jessica said quickly. I promise. Your promises are worthless, I told her. Both of you showed me exactly how much I matter to you. Now that you think I have money, suddenly you care again. It's not about money, David protested. Isn't it? Where were you 6 weeks ago when I was freezing under a bridge? Where was your concern then? He had no answer because we both knew the truth. If I was still homeless, they never would have come looking for me. I think you should leave, I said. Mom, please. Give us another chance. We're family. Family doesn't throw each other away when things get difficult. Family doesn't abandon 74-year-old mothers in rainstorms. You stopped being my family the night you chose Jessica's comfort over your mother's safety. David was sobbing now. Please, Mom. I love you. If you loved me, you would have loved me when I was broken and poor. Love isn't something you turn on and off based on someone's bank account. I opened the front door. Goodbye, David. They left without another word. After they were gone, I sat on my couch and cried. Not because I was sad, because I was relieved. Seeing them again confirmed what I already knew. Their apology wasn't about love or regret. It was about money and guilt. I called Victoria and told her about the visit. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. But David and Jessica weren't done with me. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything. David sent flowers every day. Jessica wrote tearful letters begging for forgiveness. They showed up at my building so often that Miguel had to threaten them with trespassing charges. Then they got clever. They started calling my new friends from the book club, telling sob stories about how I was keeping them from their grandchildren, David had no children, and how worried they were about my mental health. Mrs. Chun came to my apartment after receiving one of these calls. Your son called me, she said. He seems very worried about you. What did he say? That you're not thinking clearly since your accident. That you've been giving money to strangers and making bad decisions. I sighed. Mrs. Chun, I was never in an accident. David threw me out of his house, and I lived on the streets until my sister found me. Now that I have money, he wants back in my life. Mrs. Chun nodded thoughtfully. I thought his story didn't sound right. You're the sharpest person I know. Word spread quickly through our building about David's lies. My neighbors, who had grown to love me over the past few months, were outraged. Carmen, the building manager, banned David and Jessica from the property. But they still didn't give up. Margaret Stone, Victoria's lawyer, called me one afternoon with disturbing news. Helen, David and Jessica have filed a petition claiming you're mentally incompetent. They're trying to get guardianship over you and your assets. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Can they do that? They can try. They've hired a lawyer and are claiming that your recent financial decisions prove you're not capable of managing your affairs. What financial decisions? Living in an expensive condo, having a large bank account, buying new clothes. They're saying no mentally competent person would go from homeless to wealthy without being manipulated or confused. I was furious. So, because I'm not poor anymore, I must be crazy? That's essentially their argument. Don't worry, Helen. We're going to fight this and win. But you need to be prepared for a battle. Margaret explained that we would need to prove my mental competence through medical evaluations and witness testimony. She also warned me that David and Jessica would probably try to visit me again, hoping to record conversations that might support their case. Don't talk to them without me present, she advised. Sure enough, 2 days later David showed up at my door again. This time he was alone and seemed more desperate than before. Mom, we need to talk. Just the two of us. I have nothing to say to you, David. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'm your son. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He immediately started recording on his phone. Mom, I'm worried about you. This place, all this money, it doesn't seem like you. I realized what he was doing. He wanted me to say something that would make me sound confused or manipulated. Turn off the phone, David. I just want to understand how you went from homeless to living like this. Did someone convince you to spend your life savings? Turn off the phone or leave. He kept recording. Are you taking any new medications? Have you been feeling confused or disoriented? That's when I knew for certain that the little boy I raised was gone forever. In his place was a greedy stranger who would exploit his own mother's trauma to steal her money. I called security, and Miguel escorted David out of the building. But I knew he had gotten what he came for, me looking angry and defensive on camera. Margaret wasn't worried when I told her about David's recording. Let him show that video in court, she said. Any judge will see that you were appropriately upset about being secretly recorded by your son. As the court date approached, Margaret helped me prepare my testimony. We gathered evidence of my mental competence, medical records, testimony from my neighbors and friends, and documentation of my charitable giving and responsible financial management. I had started donating to homeless shelters and organizations that help elderly people. I also set up a trust fund to provide scholarships for single mothers returning to school. Margaret said these donations actually proved my mental clarity, not confusion. Someone who is being manipulated or is mentally incompetent doesn't typically engage in thoughtful philanthropy, she explained. The night before the hearing, Victoria drove down from Santa Fe to be with me. Are you nervous? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. What if they win? What if I lose everything again? That won't happen. You're one of the smartest, strongest people I know. The judge will see that. I keep thinking about the little boy David used to be, sweet and loving and protective of his mother. How did he turn into this person? Victoria sighed. Some people only love conditionally. They love you when you're useful or when it benefits them. When you needed help, David saw you as a burden. Now that you have money, he sees you as a resource to exploit. I raised him better than that. You did. But somewhere along the way, he chose to be selfish instead of kind. That's not your fault. The hearing was held in a small courtroom downtown. David and Jessica sat on one side with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Margaret and I sat on the other side with Victoria for moral support. David's lawyer went first, painting me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated into giving away my money. He showed David's recording and argued that my sudden lifestyle change proved mental instability. Your Honor, he said, Helen Martinez went from living on the streets to owning luxury property and having millions in the bank. No rational person makes such dramatic changes without being influenced by someone with ulterior motives. When it was Margaret's turn, she methodically destroyed their argument. Your Honor, Mrs. Martinez lived on the streets because her son threw her out of his home during a rainstorm. She had nowhere else to go. When her loving sister found her and provided assistance, Mrs. Martinez made careful, thoughtful decisions about her new circumstances. Margaret presented my medical records showing perfect mental health, letters from my neighbors praising my kindness and intelligence, and documentation of my charitable giving. Mrs. Martinez didn't just spend her money frivolously, Margaret continued. She chose a safe, appropriate home for a woman her age. She donated generously to causes she cares about. She made friends and engaged in community activities. These are the actions of a mentally sharp, emotionally healthy person. Then it was my turn to testify. I was terrified, but I looked directly at the judge and told my story calmly and clearly. Your Honor, I'm not mentally incompetent. I'm just no longer willing to be a victim. My son taught me that I can't count on family to love me unconditionally, but I learned that I can count on myself. David's lawyer tried to shake my testimony, asking about my sudden wealth and dramatic personality change. I haven't changed, sir, I said. I've just finally been given the chance to live instead of just survive. The judge asked David to explain why he believed I was incompetent. She's not acting like herself, David said weakly. She's living expensively and won't even talk to her family. Mr. Martinez, the judge said sternly, are you suggesting that your mother should live in poverty to prove her mental competence? Or that she should maintain relationships with people who abandoned her? David had no good answer. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. I find no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Martinez is mentally incompetent. On the contrary, she appears to be an intelligent, capable woman who has made reasonable decisions about her life and finances. The petition is denied. He then looked directly at David. Mr. Martinez, I find it deeply disturbing that you would try to have your own mother declared incompetent after abandoning her when she needed help most. This court will not be used to help you access money that doesn't belong to you. My own blood dragged me to the edge of death, but strangers and my sister saved me. If you wouldn't throw your own family away like trash, subscribe now without hesitation. If you won't, then be brave enough to write in the comments why. David's face turned red with humiliation. Jessica grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent in his ear. They both looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. As we left the courthouse, David made one final desperate attempt. He ran after me in the parking lot, tears streaming down his face. Mom, please. I made a mistake. I was scared and stupid, and Jessica was pressuring me. I never meant for things to go this far. I stopped walking and turned to face him one last time. The little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street was gone. In his place stood a man who had chosen greed over love. David, when you threw me out in that storm, you made a choice. When you ignored me for 6 weeks while I lived on the streets, you made another choice. When you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my money, you made a third choice. I can't unmake those choices for you. But I'm your son. No, I said quietly. You were my son. Sons protect their mothers. Sons don't abandon them when life gets hard. You're just a stranger who shares my DNA. David collapsed onto his knees right there in the parking lot, sobbing like a child. Several people stopped to stare. Jessica looked mortified and tried to pull him up. Get up, David, she hissed. People are watching. Even in his moment of breakdown, she was more concerned about appearances than his pain. I almost felt sorry for both of them. They deserved each other. I walked to Victoria's car without looking back. As we drove away, I saw David still kneeling on the asphalt in my side mirror, growing smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. That evening, Victoria, Margaret, and I celebrated at a fine steakhouse downtown. The victory felt different than I expected. Instead of triumph, I felt a deep sense of peace. How do you feel? Victoria asked, raising her glass of wine. Free, I said. Completely and utterly free. Margaret smiled. You should be proud of yourself, Helen. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to their family like that. I had good teachers, I said, looking at Victoria. Sometimes you have to lose everything to learn what really matters. As we ate our celebration dinner, Victoria shared more details about her business success. She had started with one small rental property and gradually built an empire spanning 12 states. Her net worth was actually much higher than the $5 million she had given me. I always planned to share my wealth with you, she said. I just never imagined it would happen under such terrible circumstances. Everything happens for a reason, I replied. If David hadn't thrown me away, I never would have discovered how strong I really am. Margaret raised her glass again. To new beginnings and chosen family. We toasted, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into planning my foundation. Margaret helped me navigate the legal requirements, while Victoria provided business advice and seed money. I decided to name it the Martinez Foundation for Elder Care, focusing specifically on helping elderly people who had been abandoned or abused by their families. Our mission statement read, "No person should face their golden years alone simply because their family failed them. Every senior deserves dignity, safety, and love." Word of my story had somehow leaked to the local media, and a reporter from the Albuquerque Journal wanted to interview me. At first, I declined. I didn't want pity or attention. But Margaret convinced me that sharing my experience could help other people in similar situations. The article, titled "From Homeless to Helping Others," ran on the front page of the Sunday edition. Within days, I received hundreds of calls and emails from elderly people across the country who had experienced similar abandonment. One letter particularly moved me. It was from an 82-year-old man named Robert whose children had put him in a nursing home and then stopped visiting. He had been trying to get released for months but had nowhere to go. "Mrs. Martinez," he wrote, "reading your story gave me hope that I'm not invisible. Maybe there are still good people in the world." I immediately called Robert and arranged for our foundation to help him find an appropriate living situation. He became our first official client, and seeing his joy when he moved into his own apartment reminded me why this work was so important. "What's next for you?" Margaret asked during one of our planning meetings. "I want to expand our reach," I said. "There are Roberts everywhere, sitting in institutions or living on the streets because their families gave up on them." Victoria nodded enthusiastically. "I can help with the real estate side. We could create transitional housing, maybe even build communities specifically designed for abandoned seniors." The more we talked, the bigger our vision became. We would offer not just housing, but counseling, legal advocacy, medical support, and most importantly, friendship and community. 6 months later, I opened the Martinez Foundation for Elder Care in a beautiful renovated building downtown. The grand opening was attended by the mayor, several city council members, and over 100 people from the community. Victoria had insisted on making it a proper celebration. There were balloons, a catered lunch, and a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Local news stations covered the event, and the story went viral on social media. But the most meaningful moment came when Maria, the homeless woman who had shared her blanket with me under the bridge in Denver, cut the ribbon alongside me. Victoria's investigator had tracked her down, and our foundation had helped her get an apartment, medical care for her diabetes, and job training as a peer counselor. "You saved my life," Maria told the gathered crowd, her voice shaking with emotion. "Helen showed me that being abandoned by family doesn't mean you're worthless. Sometimes it just means you're ready for better people to find you." The audience gave us a standing ovation, and I had to fight back tears. This was what I had been meant to do with my second chance at life. In our first year, we helped over 200 elderly people start new lives. Some we reunited with loving family members who didn't know they needed help. Others we provided with legal protection from families trying to exploit them. Many we simply gave friendship and community to replace the family connections they had lost. One of our most successful programs was Adopted Grandparents, which paired isolated seniors with young families looking for extended support systems. Mrs. Chun, my neighbor, became the first coordinator of this program. Everyone needs family, she explained to potential participants. Blood family, chosen family, adopted family, it doesn't matter. What matters is having people who care about you and check on you and celebrate your birthdays. The program was so successful that other cities began requesting our help to implement similar initiatives. Victoria suggested we franchise the concept, but I wanted to keep it nonprofit and focused on service rather than profit. We're not trying to get rich, I reminded her. We're trying to heal hearts. Speaking of healing hearts, my own continued to grow stronger every day. I had developed close friendships with several of the seniors we served, and they had become my chosen family. There was Eleanor, a 78-year-old former librarian whose children lived across the country and rarely called. She became my weekly lunch companion and introduced me to authors I had never heard of. There was Frank, an 85-year-old widower whose son had moved him to a nursing home against his will and then sold his house. We helped him get his own apartment, and he became our volunteer handyman, fixing everything from leaky faucets to broken hearts. There was Dorothy, a 72-year-old retired nurse whose daughter had stolen her retirement savings and then cut off contact. She became our medical advocate, helping other seniors navigate healthcare systems and insurance problems. Together, we formed a community of survivors who understood each other's pain and celebrated each other's victories. We shared holidays, birthdays, and quiet Sunday afternoons. We had found what David and his family never gave us: unconditional love and acceptance. As the foundation grew, so did media attention to my story. I was invited to speak at conferences about elder abuse and abandonment. A documentary filmmaker wanted to make a movie about our work. A publisher approached me about writing a book. You've become a symbol of hope for abandoned seniors everywhere, the publisher told me. Your story could help thousands of people. I agreed to write the book, titled Under the Bridge: How Losing Everything Taught Me What Really Matters. The advance was substantial, and I donated every penny to the foundation. The book signing tour was surreal. In city after city, elderly people lined up to share their own stories of family abandonment and betrayal. Many of them cried as they talked. All of them thanked me for making them feel less alone. In Chicago, an 80-year-old man named Walter told me his 3 sons had stopped visiting after his wife died because they found him too depressing. In Seattle, a 75-year-old woman named Grace explained how her daughter had convinced her to sign over power of attorney and then moved her to a nursing home to access her pension. In Atlanta, a 77-year-old man named Samuel described how his family had declared him incompetent and sold his home while he was recovering from surgery. Every story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. These were good people who had raised families, worked hard, and deserved love and respect in their later years. Instead, they had been discarded like trash by the people who should have cherished them most. Why do you think families abandon their elderly relatives? A reporter asked during one interview. Fear, I said without hesitation. They're afraid of aging, afraid of responsibility, afraid of being reminded that they're not immortal. It's easier to throw away the mirror than to face what it shows you. But you're not bitter about what happened to you? I was for a while. But bitterness is like poison. It hurts you more than the person you're angry at. David made his choice. I made mine. I chose to turn my pain into purpose. Meanwhile, David's life had taken a very different trajectory. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that he and Jessica had divorced about 18 months after a court case. The legal bills had bankrupted them, and the stress had destroyed their marriage. David had moved back in with Jessica's parents temporarily, but wore out his welcome quickly. He bounced between apartments, unable to hold steady employment due to his reputation in the insurance industry. Apparently, word had spread about his treatment of his elderly mother, and potential employers found him untrustworthy. Who would hire someone who abandons family when things get tough? Jessica had remarried within a year, choosing a wealthy older man who could provide the lifestyle she craved. According to gossip, She pretended her first marriage had never happened and told people she was a widow rather than admit to being divorced. I felt no satisfaction learning about their troubles. Seeing others suffer, even those who had hurt me, brought no joy. I had moved beyond the need for revenge into a place of genuine indifference. "Do you ever miss him?" Victoria asked during one of her visits. "I miss the child I thought I raised," I admitted. "But I don't miss the man he became. And I don't waste time mourning someone who never really existed." No regrets. Only that I didn't stand up for myself sooner. But maybe I needed to hit rock bottom to discover my real strength. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes our greatest gifts come wrapped in our worst experiences. As my 80th birthday approached, the foundation staff wanted to throw me a big celebration. I initially resisted, but they wore me down with their enthusiasm. The party was held in the foundation's main hall, decorated with photos from our 5 years of service. Over 300 people attended: foundation clients, staff, volunteers, city officials, and media representatives. Victoria gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. 5 years ago, my sister was thrown away like garbage by people who should have treasured her. Today, she's a beacon of hope for abandoned seniors across the country. She turned her deepest pain into her greatest purpose. That's not just survival, that's transformation. But the most meaningful moment came when Frank, our volunteer handyman, stood up with a small gift box. "Helen," he said, his voice wavering with emotion, "you saved all of us. Not just by giving us shelter and support, but by showing us that we still matter, that we're still worth loving." Inside the box was a simple silver necklace with a small bridge charm. "We all came from under different bridges," Frank explained. "But you taught us that bridges don't just represent the places we've fallen, they represent the connections we can build." I wore that necklace every day from then on, a reminder of the journey from desperation to purpose. The foundation continued to expand, opening branches in 8 different states. We developed innovative programs like Silver Mentors, which paired experienced seniors with younger people facing career or life challenges, and Wisdom Keepers, which recorded and preserved the life stories of isolated elderly people. My favorite program was Family of Choice, which helped abandoned seniors form intentional communities with others in similar situations. These weren't just housing arrangements, they were genuine families built on choice rather than obligation. One such family included 5 women aged 73 to 89 who bought a large house together in Santa Fe, not far from Victoria's mansion. They shared cooking duties, household responsibilities, and most importantly, the joys and sorrows of daily life. "We're better family to each other than our biological families ever were," said the eldest, a former teacher named Ruth. "Blood may be thicker than water, but chosen love is thicker than blood." Their story was featured in a national magazine, and soon we were getting calls from groups of seniors across the country wanting to create similar arrangements. As the foundation approached its 10th anniversary, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. From homeless and hopeless under a bridge to helping thousands of people find new purpose, it seemed impossible, yet here I was. I still lived in my beautiful condo in Albuquerque, though I had purchased the unit next door and converted it into office space for the foundation's administrative work. Miguel, still working as doorman despite being well past retirement age, had become one of my dearest friends. "Mrs. Martinez," he often said, "you made this whole building better just by being here." Carmen, the building manager, had become an unofficial aunt figure, checking on me daily and making sure I was eating well and not working too hard. Mrs. Chun, now 90, was still sharp as a tack and served on the foundation's advisory board. She had outlived most of her own family, but never seemed lonely because she had created such a rich network of chosen relationships. On quiet Sunday afternoons, I would sit on my balcony looking out at the mountains and marveling at the unexpected beauty of my life. Victoria often joined me, and we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if David hadn't thrown you out? She asked one afternoon. Sometimes, I admitted. I probably would have stayed small and grateful for scraps of attention. I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of. So, in a strange way, you're grateful? I thought about it carefully. I'm grateful for where I ended up. I'm grateful for the people I've been able to help. I'm grateful for discovering my own strength. But I'll never be grateful for the cruelty itself. Some things are just wrong, even if good eventually comes from them. Victoria squeezed my hand. You're wiser than I am. No, just older and more tired. Wisdom is just exhaustion wearing a fancy hat. She laughed, and the sound carried across the mountains like music. As I write this story now, I'm 84 years old. The Martinez Foundation has helped over 5,000 elderly people rebuild their lives after family abandonment. We operate in 15 states and have inspired similar organizations across the globe. More importantly, I wake up every morning surrounded by love, purpose, and respect. My chosen family is vast and devoted. My legacy will outlive me by generations. David never contacted me again after that day in the courthouse parking lot. I heard he remarried a few years ago and moved to Oregon. I hope he found some measure of peace, though I suspect guilt is a hard companion to shake. Sometimes young people ask me if I would take him back if he genuinely apologized and changed his ways. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, I tell them. I forgive David because carrying anger hurts me, not him. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean giving someone another chance to harm you. But he's your son, they often protest. Biology isn't destiny. Being a parent means earning the title every single day. David stopped being my son when he chose cruelty over compassion. I stopped being his mother when I finally learned to love myself enough to walk away. They usually look sad when I say this, especially the younger ones who still believe family bonds are unbreakable. I understand their sadness, but I don't share it anymore. My real children are the thousands of seniors who call me their chosen mother. My real siblings are the people who show up when I need them. My real family is built on love, respect, and mutual care, not shared DNA and broken promises. If you're watching this and you've been abandoned, forgotten, or discarded by people who were supposed to love you, please know that your story doesn't end there. You are not worthless because someone treated you as worthless. You are not unlovable because someone failed to love you properly. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us the most about our own strength. Sometimes losing everything is the first step toward finding what we were truly meant to have. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very brave, our guardian angels are searching for us just when we need them most. They might be sisters who hire private investigators, or neighbors who share blankets, or strangers who become family. The bridge I slept under that horrible night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my real life. Every ending is also a beginning, if you're brave enough to keep walking. I'm Helen Martinez. I survived abandonment, homelessness, legal battles, and heartbreak. I discovered my purpose, built my legacy, and found my real family along the way. Sometimes throwing your mother away is the biggest mistake a person can make, not because of what it costs them, but because of what it reveals about who they really are. David thought he was getting rid of dead weight. Instead, he threw away the only person who would have loved him unconditionally for the rest of his life. The judge said it best: family who abandon their elders don't deserve another chance. If you believe that too, subscribe before this story ends. And if you don't, step into the comments and tell the world why you think betrayal deserves forgiveness. His loss became the world's gain, and my pain became thousands of people's hope. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from around the world. You're all part of my chosen family now. Remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more worthy of love than anyone who abandoned you ever deserved to realize.